I'm really excited about this show and my guest today. So I'm chatting with Reddy, who's a senior manager in HRIS at NSF. It's an amazing nonprofit working hard to improve human and planet health. So I love it when I get to talk to HR professionals in the field. I especially love diving into the tangibles of how they're actually impacting change at companies and in the field of HR in general. Ron, before we get into that though, I couldn't help but notice on my pre-show notes that you nearly lost an eye playing cricket. You got to tell me what happened
Oh,
there.
yeah, sure, it did, right? So that is a good reminder. Not everything should be manual, by the way, including dodging the fast balls, right?
Yeah, well, I will say I think you would have looked great in an eye patch had it come to that. But I'm glad you have both eyes and
Thank you.
we'll see well. All right, so you've done a number of sessions recently, speaking events and HR events, talking about the modern HR crisis. All right, so what's the number one takeaway for HR leaders listening right now as it relates to AI in the field of HR?
It all boils down to that 73% problem. And I'm sure you would have heard about this somewhere else, but think about that. We've got about three-quarters of a HR team just working on the administrative tasks, and all of that is manual. Just imagine that for a second, right? They don't get to focus on anything strategic, but instead they have to do all of that manually. And this inefficiency is huge. It's really expensive. Like we're talking about organizations spending around $18 to $20,000 per employee just trying to keep up the lights. That's massive. And as you can see, 68% of the companies are still fragmented. They're just basically running on fragmented systems, which is a massive pain, right? So that's what I'm trying to address today.
So, how do we pull HR professionals out of the administrative trenches and get them more into strategy type work? So, you proposed a tiered model where AI does some of the heavy lifting?
Absolutely. I think that's the way to go. With the recent boom in I think we should leverage it. So does every organization should, right? And the resources are shifting dramatically, right? Everything that is manual at some point is turning into an automation. So we should be leveraging all of that, and that includes HR, right? So I propose a four-tiered solution. Tier zero is being completely managed by AI. We call it the AI-powered self-service. What you can do with that is to have a 24/7 AI agents supporting anything between 85 to 95% of all of our manual tasks today. By doing that, you take away all of that administrative efforts and then try to keep it automated. That's tier zero, what we're talking about. Once you've taken out all of that 85 to 90 or 90 to 95% administrative tasks, you really have like 10 to 15% manual job. And what does that really contain? It's everything that has got to do with the human touch, right? So now we have three layers of that human aspect of it. You have tier one, where you have the HR generalist trying to handle most of the complex policy questions that are very specific to the organization, right? And then the rest will be handled by the specialists. They talk about, let's say, the legal compliance issues, the conflict issues, right, that you can tackle. And then finally, that 1% really goes to, the leaders who can drive the strategy and talk about executive compensation. But really 80, 90, 95% is the target that we're looking at to get through the automation. That's the framework I'm proposing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know that is the goal in the future state and promise of what AI can help deliver in organizations. But I know AI can really only be as good as the data that it feeds on. So, for our listeners, especially on the HR side who are wary of these complex IT projects, what's the biggest piece of advice that you have for integrating these smart HR systems with existing systems of record or ERP systems?
Sure, no, that's a great question. And I think I'll address this to all of my HRIS peeps, right? And the IT folks who are listening to this, hopefully, right? I am proposing that the tech foundation that we have should be solid, right? That's the most important part. We've got fragmented systems, but we're all looking at now bringing all that into one layer. We call that unified data foundation. As in, you could have mergers and acquisitions, you could have different systems being brought into the organization. But the idea is basically to have a unified data layer on top of all of that, which basically means you should have one ERP where we consolidate all of that data and it's always available. The 99.9% uptime is what we're looking at. So that's the first key thing that we should be building. So once we have that ERP data foundation set, then we talk about the integration strategy. I mean, those days are gone when we would use a database connection or an Excel file to integrate two systems. We should stop doing that, right? This is a generation of AI. We should be leveraging that and also look at the API level integration. Everything should be API based. We are all inclined to use Excel, but let's try and use APIs, right? And by doing so, you can have all of that data synchronized, and that gives you a ton of automation capability. Think about automating some of your payroll reconciliation things. It's a pain. We all know that because we got data coming from different sources. Reconciling that is a lot of hard work. But with having the solid unified data foundation and the API level integrations, we can absolutely achieve that through automation.
Yeah, so I don't mean to paraphrase you here, but it sounds like there needs to be more of a focus and investment in the development and integration on systems in general across the organization and really solidifying this data layer that sits on top of all these fragmented systems.
Correct. Absolutely. It's all about the change management. This takes time, right? We got to be patient with it. And AI is evolving every day. There is new technologies coming in every single day. We need to have a governance model just to see how to adopt AI and come up with more strategic options, not just adopt whatever we see coming along. I would say take it slow, but be strategic about what we're doing.